What these super apps feel like to me is like a consolidated form where they're trying to keep you in one place.
The cynical/skeptical side is they are trying to build an ecosystem and lock you in.
Could this be an excuse to just raise prices? It doesn't necessarily have to be $20 to $100. If they raise it from 20 to 25, that's more than a 20% increase in revenues.
Anthropic secretly changed their pricing page where it said that the Pro plan, that is a $20 plan that I'm currently using to run Claude code, no longer lists Claude code as a feature.
I understand, but this is probably one of the bigger issues with AI in general is that people are using very powerful models for simple tasks, which is making the company lose money. Yeah. So it's a tough decision from the company level, but I think at the end of the day, the users paying for it, they deserve to get what they're paying for. I'm Lior from Exploring ChatGPT.
Hi, everyone. Daniel from Why Try AI here on Substack as well. Many of the companies are starting to consolidate a lot of their fragmented offerings into more combined apps. There was a news article a couple of weeks ago which literally used the term super app, that OpenAI is working on a super app that will bring in ChatGPT, Codex, which is their version of Claude Code or the coding agent or local agent, and the Atlas browser into kind of one big super app where you can just do everything from that one hub. And just also last week, Anthropic finally turned the Claude desktop app, which existed for a while and had Claude Code in it, but they've basically turned it into an IDE or integrated development environment, right? Before that, I used personally Visual Studio Code to run Claude Code, or other people use whatever, Cursor or whatever's out there. And now it looks like Anthropic is moving in the direction of saying, from now on, the Claude desktop app allows you to run the terminal, the command line interface, and everything else within one app. And then we got, just I think a couple of days ago, we got Gemini for Windows as an app as well, which also runs from your desktop and gives you access to it. So I'm seeing more and more gravitation towards consolidating the offerings into one. And I thought it was curious to talk about what does it mean? What could be the motivations for the companies, is it? And where is it all heading? Kind of. That's the gist of it.
That's a good gist. I think probably the thing that stands out to me the most about this is I'm somebody, I think Daniel as well, that somebody that uses multiple models, different companies. I don't judge. I like to try, I like to experiment. Why try AI? I think why try AI is actually experimentation. And actually it all started from a place of having fun, even up until this point. If it's not fun to me, it's probably not worth it. Obviously for example, with Substack, we've grown to a point where it's become more than just fun. I do feel a bit of a personal responsibility towards my audience and to put out quality. But at the same time, I think what these super apps feel like to me, the idea of it at least, because I haven't actually seen one, is a consolidated form where they're trying to keep you in one place.
Exactly.
Instead of bouncing around. And I like bouncing around.
Yeah. I don't have a strong personal opinion. I'm not really political when it comes to AI, or I don't take sides in it. But you can look at it through two different perspectives. And I think both of them are true to some extent. One of them is they're just trying to make things convenient. Me personally, I would much rather go to one place and experience all of ChatGPT or OpenAI models instead of saying for Sora, which is now dead, but never mind. Let's use it as an example. For Sora, I need to log in here. For image generation, I need to go here. And for ChatGPT, I have to go elsewhere. And for Codex, I need to download yet another app. So for me, it is convenient to be able to say at some point, I have one place, my dashboard, and I have all of my things in one place. But the cynical/skeptical side is they are trying to build an ecosystem and lock you in. And Google has always had it. Google has started with an ecosystem and it plugged Gemini into its ecosystem. But OpenAI and Anthropic, they don't really per se have one. But the more offerings they put into one specific, all-in-one structure, the more you get tempted to just stay within that. Because now I have everything I need from Anthropic. Why would I also want to plug in and go elsewhere? And I think the entry point to going into a super app is also, I think they're trying to build a moat, basically, to some extent. That's this cynical way of looking at things.
Yeah. I think on the more optimistic side, it's not trying to push back or anything, but I think on the more optimistic side, I will say this. If, let's say, context windows get a lot better and there's a more efficient kind of continuity, where you don't like lose track. Sometimes when you do bounce around, it's hard to maintain that continuity, especially if you find something that's really working for you. So I guess like within these super apps, if you have just better continuity, that might actually really draw me into staying in that ecosystem. But at the same time, like, I'm still thinking about the fact that yeah, some tools are better than others for me personally.
Sure.
It's funny. For our last YouTube video, I was doing my thing, my usual thing, and I always talk about how good Nano Banana 2 is, right? And it was glitching out. So many people were using it. I look at the down detector and just hundreds and hundreds of complaints. And typically, just quick background, a little bit of a tangent, but when I make a thumbnail for YouTube, I basically like you get the auto-generated thumbnail from
Right.
YouTube, which is basically like a screenshot, right? And then I take that and then I do my thing. I make the thumbnail from that. But Nano Banana 2 is which from Gemini is the final tool. That's the final image generator. And it kept generating random faces, which is the opposite of what my prompt is saying to do. My prompt is saying, um, you know, maintain the same
Yeah,
facial
yeah. Use
structure.
them as reference characters or whatever.
Yeah, maybe it makes us look a little bit better than we actually look
Is
sometimes.
that possible? Come on, look at this.
Yeah, yeah. I think I remember you saying one time it was like we're like see like it makes
I
you
was
look like
like
a
a D-list
C-list.
actor playing me in a movie. I think I saw a
Yeah,
straight to DVD version of Daniel.
C-list celebrity. Like not quite Tom Cruise, but maybe just a couple ranks below. It didn't know what it was, and so I asked it, "What do you see in this photo?" And it said it sees the original Mona Lisa, and I sent it to I actually was sitting there alone in my office and was actually just laughing really hard.
I shared it. I don't know if you noticed that I shared that as an
Oh, you
AI
did?
fail in my last Sunday rundown. Yeah, yeah. And
No, I didn't.
I credited you. I gave you a shout out saying,
Did you?
yeah,
Well, you know what? If Substack is listening, I did not get that in my
you
notification.
can take a look. You're linked in the caption of the image.
Okay, you know what I'm gonna do?
You can do that now right away if you
Yeah,
want.
you know what? I'm not gonna do it now, but,
I'll
you know,
just
sorry,
no, but
everybody. I'm gonna make myself a note to say, "Check Daniel's AI fail." Okay, cool.
yeah, but back to like your point, when I'm talking about the cynical way to look at it, that's me playing devil's advocate. Like me personally,
Right.
I for now at least, I like the fact that, for example, Anthropic brought everything into one. I am now even saying to myself, hey, maybe I don't need to use VS Code at all anymore because I don't really see a benefit anymore because in a way the Claude desktop app has become the IDE that's necessary. Maybe for coding tasks, there is still a lot of advantages to run in purest terminal commands and stuff. I don't do it anyways. So for me, like the Claude desktop app is now an all-in-one place where I can just do everything. And it's like a command and control center. So for me, it's a very convenient thing. So I definitely see the benefit for the individual user.
Yeah.
And whether that's the motivation for the companies or is it a mix of also some kind of a lock-in, that's a tangential or like a secondary thing for me. And also in principle, nothing's stopping me today from downloading, OpenAI's super app if it comes out tomorrow and plug it into the same system. And in fact, when I started with the whole project of creating my second brain in Obsidian, the whole point for me was that I wanted to have a context that is agnostic of a platform. So that in principle, tomorrow I can go to OpenAI Codex and point it at the same folder where I'm working with Claude Code and say, here's my contact, let's continue working. And 95% of my routine will be more or less the same. I might need to tweak a couple of settings and things, but so I'm not personally worried about locking. But I wonder what the strategic play for a lot of the companies is. Is it convenience? Is it like giving the users a consistent message? Like, here we have one app, that's where you go, and you don't need to worry about 10 different URLs for 10 different experiences. Or is there also some element of, hey, let's try to keep the users in our ecosystem and make it more difficult to get out?
Yeah.
We'll see, I guess.
If I had to give my opinion, it's probably the latter. At the end of the day, their companies are trying to make money. And if you could lock in users, like you're going to make more money. I think one of the interesting things about this is a topic that I have been covering a little bit more and hearing people talk about a little bit more, which is just local models. And one of the main benefits really is the fact there's two main benefits. Obviously, number one being privacy. And number two being you don't have to pay a monthly subscription,
Sure.
which is nice. Obviously, it takes up a little bit more space on your computer. But
And not everything you can't. You need really strong hardware to run a lot of these models locally. The weaker your hardware, the smaller the models cap out that you
right,
can actually use. But another benefit is you're not dependent on anybody's infrastructure. If OpenAI goes down tomorrow and is offline, you can still
right.
go to our local chatbot and continue. Yeah, so plenty of benefits.
I think like the main point. Sorry if there's a lot of background noise. I have a jungle going on in my house right now. So the main point is I think it's that's like literally polar opposites, right? Like it's even comparing these super apps to what people are using now, which is just paying a monthly subscription and then having Claude going in and doing whatever they want there. But this is actually polar opposites where a local model is like completely separating you
Hmm,
from these companies trying to lock you in. And again, even, and I think to just stay open minded, I think a lot of the times, since we're in our own little AI bubble, like we don't realize that, I guess for a lot of people, for example, like $20 a month doesn't really move the needle, but for a lot of people, it does.
sure.
And that might be even a bigger factor to them to run a local model versus privacy, for example. But yeah, it's definitely, I wonder what the future will actually look like. Is it going to be more local or is it going to be more centralized super apps? That's
Yeah.
really an interesting point.
I think another hurdle for local models beyond hardware and so on is that it does require a little bit more legwork and it's I wouldn't say too much technical expertise. There are third-party services like an open router and so on, and I think there is one called I believe it's called Pinocchio or something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong if somebody's using it, which lets you install a lot of models quite easily without having to go through terminal commands and so on. You can do these things, but it does require more effort and more awareness than simply type in a website URL like ChatGPT into the browser and off you go. So I think there will always be a little bit of a divide between people who are a bit technical, or at least maybe more inclined to spend time and set up their own local models and nerd out with that. And people who are just in the mainstream who are like, listen, I'm happy to just log into whatever is available, use it, and I'm not too concerned about whatever side effects there might be.
Right.
And from pure convenience, it's a much easier message to communicate to the end user to say, you go to this one place and you get everything here instead of here's a list of 17 places that you need to experience our ecosystem in. You could argue that Google is actually suffering from a little bit of that right now because they have a lot of pretty brilliant experiments. Notebook LM is by far the most known one. Everybody probably on this call knows exactly what it is. It's a fantastic product, but it had a bit of a standalone life. It existed as a Google Labs experiment, and now they're trying to bring it under the Gemini umbrella that you have some, you know, connection between the two, and you can bring your Notebook LM notebooks into Gemini and vice versa. But they haven't quite cracked it because they have a lot of different apps running, like Google Opal, which is their no-code builder, and a lot of other experiments that they're putting out there and that exist as a sort of standalone experience, and they aren't integrated in any meaningful way into the rest of your Google suite of products. So I think we will see more and more of this, that they're going to try to figure out a way to bring all of their fragmented models and tools under some form of umbrella, for better or worse. I
Right.
think for the better, but I can see how other people might think otherwise.
Yeah. Let me ask you, have you heard of this? I actually heard about this from Chris from Toxic, which I probably mention in every stream. Shout out to Chris from Toxic, TOXSEC. I'm almost like a cheerleader for this guy. I don't care. Like it's when I see people that are incredibly intelligent and are actually experts, I've learned so much from him. And this is one of these things. I'm wondering if you heard about this, Daniel.
Yeah.
Apparently Microsoft is intending, and actually I think this was from Samuel Illingworth as well. I'm confused. I'm not getting
You
a lot
talk
of
to too many people then.
I'm not getting a lot of sleep and my brain's all over the place. So one of them. So Microsoft apparently is planning. I don't know if it's already in preview mode to end. In the beginning, they're going to make this optional, where you can actually have an AI agent sit on your taskbar if you have Windows 11.
Okay.
So I think it's like maybe an example of how one of these big tech companies is actually trying to build. It's not necessarily a super app, but it's just building it into their system, so it's already there.
Right.
And I think, like for example, and we've spoken about agents before and security and all these things. Like if I'm sitting on Windows, which my personal computer is a Mac, but when I'm working in the office, we're all on Windows. If I saw an AI agent by Microsoft in the taskbar, I wouldn't really think twice about using it. And so I think maybe that's an example of a company that already has this giant moat, or
Mm.
even, for example, like Meta is investing a bunch of money in AI right now. And I think that to like wrap around this whole idea, I think a lot of these big tech companies with their history, just experience, they realize if they don't do something on their own, they're going to have to outsource it to another company, and then that company can just blow past them.
In a sense, that's the story of Microsoft and OpenAI, right? In the beginning, all of Microsoft's AI efforts were powered by OpenAI's model. They had GPT-4 under the hood when it launched in their Bing browser at the time, and then what then became Copilot, right? But right now, you can see that they're definitely making strong efforts to develop their in-house systems, like both LLMs and image models, and kind of disconnect themselves from their dependence on third-party models like OpenAI's. And in a sense, what you're describing already exists in the form of Copilot, right? Like what Microsoft calls Copilot, it's just everywhere. You go to Office 365, you have Copilot. You go to your Microsoft computer, Windows computer, you have Copilot. The problem, I think, is what they're realizing now is that it's not enough to just like put a little icon that launches an agent as a sidebar to it. You need a rethink of the whole setup, because basically what they're trying to do now, as I see it, is that we already have a old school product that people use, and now we're just going to tack on AI on top of it and hope it works. And I think, judging by the amount of research I'm reading about the usage of Copilot, it's not anywhere close to what should technically be, because like you said, everybody's using Windows computers, especially in office situations. Everybody's on Microsoft Office in a work environment, on everybody, majority of people. And yet I wouldn't say Copilot is anywhere close to being like the main productivity driver for a lot of people, which is counterintuitive. But that's because I don't think they figured out quite how to embed it in a way that is helpful rather than annoying, because it's like a more evolved version of their Clippy that used to sit in Word and just annoy you and be useless. Copilot clearly can do more, but I don't think the integration is quite there where people naturally feel the need to turn to it. But that fits into our main topic, is like, how do all of these companies move towards a more integrated super app that, whether we want to use the term super, but something that makes sense in the people's workflow, where people naturally want to use it rather than feel it's a thing that's just forced down their throat. Because I think that's what I hear a lot from like regular people who are like, yet another embedded AI crap. No, I don't want you to rewrite my whatever I'm trying to type. Stop pestering me. So like, how do you make AI available and convenient rather than basically frustrating and annoying for people? And I'm
Yeah.
not sure if anybody's from traditional products has actually cracked that puzzle quite yet. But maybe they will.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. Just another idea that popped in my head. Could this be an excuse to just raise prices? Now we have this super app and everything's in one place, and we made this better and that better. So now
Yeah.
instead of
And
20
now,
bucks,
now for this one price, you get access to not just the chatbot, but also this and also this. And Anthropic is doing that with Claude Code Design, where you can design
yeah,
interfaces from within Claude, all of that. And you could argue that at some point they might make, or at least might try to make the point that, hey, you're getting so much more value for money now that it's not sustainable that $20 a month gives you this. There is actually, I don't know if you noticed that, maybe you didn't, because I'm sitting with Claude Code, but there was actually a huge backlash on Reddit for two reasons around Anthropic. One of them is that the Opus 4.7 model is basically crappier than 4.6, even though on paper it shouldn't be. So people are like, is it because it's nerfed behind the scenes? Are they capping it so that they're not burning through compute? What is going on? Is it a bait and switch? And just today, there is a huge backlash because apparently someone spotted that Anthropic secretly, or without announcing it, changed their pricing page, where it said that the Pro plan, that is a $20 plan that I'm currently using to run Claude Code, no longer lists Claude Code as a feature. So people are like, oh, are they about to switch and say that Claude Code is now only for the Max plan, which is $100 or more per month? So huge backlash, and I think they quietly went and reverted it. So now people are saying, they're putting it back for now. So something's going on. So basically, just to say that your point isn't that far-fetched, that I think they are trying to both give us a lot of stuff, but then use that to say, now you're getting all this stuff, so pay up. Maybe it's
yeah,
$30, maybe it's $50, because now you can expect that for $20 you get access to all of this goodness, right? That we've
right.
put into this one super app. So yeah, I don't think it's a far-fetched speculation.
Yeah, that makes total sense. That makes total sense, especially now that you mentioned that. I guess I may have a little bit off topic, but you mentioned Opus 4.7, and it's a topic that I've covered. So yeah, definitely there were rumors going around. So one, it's not necessarily a rumor that they nerfed it. What they did was they basically tried to release this model as it's not Mythos, obviously, right? Not even close from because I have a source that has used Mythos big tech, and
Yeah. They
there was a lot
position
of
it
hype.
very clearly as midway between Opus 4.6 and Mythos. You can actually see the benchmarks. They are using Mythos
Yeah.
as a benchmark, so
Okay.
they're not claiming it as close to Mythos.
Right. So they did intentionally nerf it because they have to basically weaken it in terms of cybersecurity capabilities.
Exactly.
And so I think there's two paths that you have to look at. So one is so yes, they did make it weaker in terms of cybersecurity capabilities, and maybe that has some downstream effects to the actual efficiency of the model itself in other aspects.
Mm.
It's that plays around with AI or even plays around with it in a very serious way. I'm sure you'll notice that when you try to fix something, something else breaks, right? But in this case, it's like they broke something and then it broke something else.
Yeah.
As that idea.
Yeah.
But then also there's also I think the real rumor is that they're intentionally, again, no evidence, so just hypothetical. They're intentionally rerouting Opus 4.7 for certain tasks down to lower models for cost efficiency reasons.
They're actually quite transparent, not transparent. Okay, so two things there. First of all, the degradation in quality that people are complaining about is not Opus 4.7 compared to Mythos, which isn't released, because that's
Right.
clear. But many people are saying it's pretty overwhelming consensus that it's stupider than 4.6, which is its
Right.
older model. So that
Right.
people who have used and worked with 4.6 and were competent saying, I'm running the same problems and 4.7 is just outright crap compared to 4.6, which is supposedly the older model. So something's going on behind the scenes. And another thing they did, and that's what related to your last point, is they, for a while, now they brought it back. But back in the day in Claude Code, you could select manually the thinking effort. It higher thinking efforts, they spend more tokens, but they allegedly, the model spends more time thinking and gives you better outputs. And what 4.7 did, and that's actually the mistake that GPT-5 did when it launched back in August last year, is that took away the ability to select the thinking efforts. And they said, the model's going to decide. If your question is complicated, it's going to decide to go for high effort. And many people were saying that the Anthropic router, the adaptive thinking model, is crap, that it decides that something doesn't require thinking when it actually does. And then the answers that it comes back with are crappy. Whether it's done for compute reasons, like you said, to route it to a lower model that doesn't spend tokens, or whether they just had a glitch. But the consensus is pretty clear that Anthropic is throwing away a lot of goodwill that they built up, especially after the leaving ChatGPT era with the whole when people
Right.
gravitated to Anthropic due to the spate with the US government over the
Right.
military
Right.
contracts and so on. And now they've built all these awesome products. They've built a lot of stuff. They built all this goodwill. And then they launched this. They changed their tokenizer, which makes things more expensive over time because now things cost more than one token, or it's like a conversion basically. And the output is crappy, at least for now. So a lot of people are up in arms about it. I don't know what effect it will have on the long term. But yeah, it's a bit of a tangent, this specific discussion, but it is part of the where are these companies heading? What are they trying to build? What is the ecosystem they're trying to keep people in? Um, and yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's interesting to observe so far. I think
Yeah.
that the jury is very much still out.
Yeah. I like tangents. So just to not to dwell on this too long, I think that the user should have the decision to reroute to a lower model. It shouldn't be an
Absolutely.
automatic decision, especially like you're paying a certain dollar amount and you want, and again, like I understand, but this is probably one of the bigger issues with AI in general is that people are using very powerful models for simple tasks, which is making the company lose money. So
Exactly.
it's a tough decision from the company level, but I think at the end of the day, if the user's paying for it, they deserve to get what they're paying for. So yeah, it's a tricky topic here. But I will say, not to stay on this tangent too long, we've seen so many releases from Anthropic specifically. I think they were just trying to keep that hype train going. And
Yeah.
at a certain point, obviously, they're
I,
going to
I,
do something wrong.
yeah. No, I don't think it's possible to always be in the public's eye like the good guys. There is always going to be some pushback somewhere. But I think the counter argument that the companies would make to your argument, I'm paying for it and I have access to it, it's a little bit, maybe I'm oversimplifying this analogy, but it's a little bit like the all-you-can-eat buffets, right? Their assumption is that the majority of people will pay for the buffet and will eat a reasonable amount of food, and they will win over time. And then there are a couple of people who you will just eat until they can't eat anymore. It's okay, we can afford a couple of those people coming in. But in the case of Anthropic, it feels like maybe suddenly it's the majority of people who come in and eat more than they should or whatever. And suddenly the all-you-can-eat buffet price is no longer enough to cover that, right? And they're like, ooh, what do we do? That's basically where they're ending up with the thing. And that's why the whole thing happened with maybe Claude Code. Although I would argue they are protected from it by the fact that they have weekly rate limits. Like with my Pro account, I hit them even faster now with the more expensive models. So at some point, I will hit my cap. Sometimes it's after 3 or 4 days of work, and then I have to wait for another 3 days before I can even access. So they are protecting themselves that way. But I think that's the argument they will all make at some point, that, hey, right now, $20 a month is not enough to cover everything you're getting and all the compute you're spending on our side by running our smart models through your trivial questions or whatever it might be. So I think they're trying to figure out a model that protects them, whether that's adaptive thinking, where the model reroutes them to a cheaper model when it decides to, which is not well received, or raising prices, or limiting how much you can use a higher model, whatever. Again, the jury's still out on that front as well, I'm pretty sure.
I think the pricing aspect, to get back to super apps, is probably one of the aspects that really makes the most sense to me. At least for somebody, you don't have to run a business to understand that when these companies grow and they're so big, just a small pricing change is huge. It doesn't necessarily have to be $20 to 100. If they raise it from 20 to 25, that's more than a 20% increase in revenue. So I think, like, back to the super apps, one of the interesting things I think about this would be, for example, I don't know if I mentioned this to you. I spoke to somebody that works at Adobe and just got Claude 2 weeks ago. And so if you think about it at scale, when these companies are outsourcing for AI products, you got to think, if all of a sudden the only option that you will have is the super app, if that's the road they're trying to go down to really keep people contained within their environment, within their AI environment, basically, is the way I would state it, is now if you have a huge company like Adobe who's now working with Anthropic, right? And now they have to basically upgrade to the super app because that's all that's available. Now, all of a sudden, you have just a crazy amount of growth, right? Because now, instead of just these companies only getting Claude, just the LLM, now they're forced into this super app where they need to get everything.
Yeah, one thing that speaks against it is the fact that for business users, or even just for developers who are a little bit more like working behind the scenes, all of these companies have APIs, right? So yes, I can have a super app for ChatGPT that allows me to do the image generation and codecs and whatever, but it's not really stopping anyone from creating a wrapper around a specific API endpoint that only does images, and creating an image generator, a standalone that runs only OpenAI's, if that's what people want. So unless they yank the plug on that, which I don't think they will, because that's a big source of revenue, because you pay per token or per usage for those, right? You still will always have that option. So just because a super app exists doesn't mean that the only way I can interact with OpenAI's models is through that super app. Again, unless they decide that they can make that move and then kill all the API endpoints. Never say never, but I think that would be shooting themselves a little bit in the foot, because a lot of people interact with Anthropic's models and OpenAI's models and Google models through the API, and they never see the consumer-facing apps in the first place, especially in the business world and the developer world, I'm pretty sure.
Right.
But how that landscape will evolve over time, again, you don't know. Will they try to maybe change that somehow and channel everybody through some kind of a gateway that, I don't know. Again,
Listen, time will tell.
yeah.
I think we'll find out pretty quickly.
I was going to say things move so fast that maybe next week already I'll have an answer.
Yeah, time will tell. In terms of shooting yourself in the foot, I think the whole idea of constantly just releasing models, I think it's shooting yourself in the foot. Take your time. Give us something that's actually better. If you give the public something and they realize, and they actually have proof, right, from their own use that it's worse than the previous model, you're really shooting yourself in the foot.
Absolutely.
That's a
I
definition
think
of it.
it's a balance, right? It's competitive pressure, because you don't want to be seen as the company that, oh, wait, OpenAI has released 2 models and you guys haven't released anything in the past half a year. What are you doing? Sleeping? Are you losing? Because that's the discourse we have around AI, right? Like, OpenAI just killed Anthropic because they released this big thing, and Anthropic's like, oh, damn it, we need to release something as well. We can. So I think it's a competitive pressure more than I'm fully agree with you. Like, I would rather have fewer but stable and actually like meaningful upgrades released than just this constant fire hose of like incremental improvements and step backs, one step forward, two steps back noise that all of us are subjected to. And that actually links really well to our last discussion about AI overwhelm, right? Because incremental improvements to each type of model you are released on a near daily basis from somewhere. And maybe if everybody slowed down and be like, you know what, from now on, every half a year is when we do a big release and it is actually meaningful. But I don't think they can. I think they need to be seen as relevant and staying in this competitive race as well. So I'm not sure that will change.
That wouldn't be the first time like big tech companies do something that people don't like.
Well,
Uh,
no.
yeah,
Where did that come from?
yeah,
People don't like big tech? What?
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting to see where this will all go.
Yeah.
I guess if I was forced into it, um, I'm not a super technical guy. So even though I speak to people that are much smarter than me in terms of like technicalities, I'm more of like an idea guy. And if I was forced into a super app, I don't know how it would feel. If it's again for me, luckily, like I back to the cost thing, like $20 a month, it's not the end of the world for me. But I have noticed as I've experimented with more and more tools and the ones that actually work for me, like I will stick with them, right? And so now all of a sudden I have an OpenAI subscription. I'm still not on Claude. I have tried it, I have played with it, but not I don't pay Claude. I don't pay Anthropic. I do pay for Gemini. I did actually start paying for Grok after what happened with the Mona Lisa situation.
Actually, ChatGPT, the new, even before the new image model that they just released yesterday, the GPT Image 2, the GPT Image 1.5, in many cases was a savior when Nano Banana 2 couldn't do the trick. So I would tell you that it's worth to explore since you're already
Yeah.
on OpenAI. Yeah, I know you are using DALI because you like the aesthetic and it's the whole old school, but DALI is like several generations old now. And if you're in the
Yeah.
ecosystem, use the GPT image models to do what you try to do with Nano Banana.
Which, by the way, they just tried to upgrade Dolly like
Okay.
2 days ago. I don't like it.
No.
I don't like it at all. It's almost I was making images for Substack and like it just lost the abstractness completely. It was just like too realistic for me.
Yeah, you can probably prompt your way out of things, but you would need to. I
Yeah,
mean, all image models have their own kind of default aesthetic, which comes out. But in many cases, if you really want it, you can prompt a third-party image model to mimic it if you know what you're after. Sometimes you said yourself, you can actually get an LLM to try and mimic it. You can show it an image and be like, how would you describe this? What would be the keywords that would get me to this style of painting? And then you
right.
use those in the image generator to homogenize your outputs a little bit across them. But that's not
Right.
to say that it's going to be 100% perfect. But
Yeah. But I think like in terms of what I was saying about subscriptions, like all of a
mm,
sudden when you do start experimenting and you find multiple tools, like all of a sudden you have a subscription of this. It's almost like you have a subscription to Netflix and YouTube
yeah,
Premium and
exactly.
Hulu. It's like the same idea. And I'm sure these companies are noticing this. So they're probably saying, hey, like these people are already paying for the people that are paying for subscriptions. Cause I think like in OpenAI, I think 90% of people use the free model. Could be wrong about that. So check me on that. But
I think
like,
it's close to that. I think they said about
so
10% of payment, if not lower, actually.
yeah. So like probably within that 10% of people, there's probably a certain percentage, who knows how big that percentage is, of the 10% that are paying for multiple models. And so these companies are probably aware of that and they're saying, how do we, because if they're paying $20 here and $20 there and $50 here, like for me, all my subscriptions, they add up. Especially like with Descript, for example, which is not like technically an AI tool. There is AI within
But they
Descript.
have more and more AI features now, right?
Yeah, which is why I love it. But it definitely adds up. So these companies, maybe they're seeing this and saying, how do we actually just gather these people and say you have everything here, and you'll actually end up paying less, even though
Yeah.
you're paying more to this one company.
Yeah. Don't go and code with Claude Code when you can already generate images here and chat here, and we have our own coding model and it's all within one. And instead of paying $20 here and $20 here, why don't you pay us $30 or whatever?
Exactly.
And you just have access to everything and it's convenient.
Exactly.
I kind of see the argument. And there have been articles about this as well. I don't know if you read Alberto Romero. He's writing The Algorithmic Bridge. He's mostly doing opinion pieces about AI, but then about the future of it. He has like philosophical pieces. You'll probably like him actually because you have the same. You call yourself also like a philosophical mind on this, right? And the idea, right? But he talked about the concepts of the AI rich and AI poor for a while, and saying the era of us having access to a buffet of free models. Even to this day, you can still use Claude for free to a certain extent. Yes, 5 messages per hour per several hours or whatever, but still. And he's like, that era is eventually going to come to an end. And we will live in a place where maybe $20 a month plans will be a thing of the past. Maybe we're living in this short period where we can access it. And at some point, you will just have to be expected to pay 50 or more or whatever to get access to the best top-notch stuff. And then the rest of us will be relegated to open source models that will always be a step behind, right? That's one way to look at where we might end up.
Yeah, I think maybe actually it'll push people more towards local models than anything, especially if they don't like the idea of it. So yeah, let's see. Will Pye says yes, they add up, especially if you don't have a business yet. If you have a business, you can probably write off the costs. That's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
Which I didn't write off the costs, so I should have.
You should. But also, if you're a power user, like which there is a subset of Substackers who make their living from automating everything. And if you're a power user, then if you are ever told that, most of them will say $200 a month is nothing compared to what I get out of this tool. The $200 Claude Max subscription that gets me Claude Code Unlimited or whatever. I can build so many things and make 20x that amount within the first day or whatever. So for them, obviously, it's a lever that gets them to a higher level of the business. But for the average person, and for even someone like me, who, yes, I use them and I write about AI, but I'm not anywhere near saying that $200, I can see it breaking even for me instantly.
Yeah. Des is asking you, Daniel, if you've tried local models.
I have tried, actually. You know what? There is even, I already forget what it was. Was it part of a browser? I even tested, there was a browser that allowed you to, within the browser, download and run local chat models, which was actually pretty clever. I'm going to try to find where it was that I saw it. But obviously what I could realistically run on my local drive is, it's very subpar models compared to what you can get in the cutting edge subscriptions. But it is an option. And like I said, there are even browsers that run it within your kind of browser environment, but still locally, in a place where if you are really particular about this and you don't want to opt in for the paid subscriptions, you do have options. And back to Leor's point, for a lot of us, the kind of work we do and the kind of questions we ask are maybe fully addressed by some of these open source models that might be several generations behind. But if I'm not on the cutting edge of coding or scientific research, maybe it's fine for practical purposes. And then why should I pay if I can install it locally and run it? Pretty legitimate path for a lot of people, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I think we've covered pretty much everything in regards to super apps. I'm trying to think here. Long pause there. I will say I think the cost factor is probably the thing that stands out to me the most. Just to wrap it up, put a bow, wrap the present nicely. Um, just as because I run businesses as well, obviously not multi-billion dollar, $1 trillion OpenAI IPO business
Yet.
yet. So yet. So it only really makes sense to think. I'm just trying to put two and two together. That the point of these super apps would be to consolidate the users. And it's funny when you say power users. Is the definition of a power user somebody who could 20x a $200 a month investment? Or is a power user somebody who can point out inefficiencies in certain tools and make an impact on the world or the just AI, maybe the smaller AI community? In my opinion, I would actually prefer to define a power user as somebody that has a larger impact versus somebody that's making a bunch of money. Because especially like when you're making a bunch of money from AI, a lot of times like people say, I made $10,000 today and all I did was pay $200 for Claude Pro Plus Max, whatever it might be. But I think, from the cost perspective, I think it definitely makes sense because they again, not to just repeat myself, but I know not necessarily power users, but I wouldn't I'm not a power user monetarily yet, at least.
No.
But I think I am a power user in terms of impact, and I think Daniel is as well, and a lot of other creators that I work with. We make an impact on the community, and to me, I think that's more important than anything. So if they see us, quote unquote, power users, however you want to define it, subscribing to multiple models, I think they'd rather consolidate that and actually make the point, try to make us think that getting into this super app, we won't need everything else.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I actually don't think that message will fall really well on someone like you and me, because by nature of what I try to do with Why Try AI is that I don't want to be locked in, because I can, because my audience kind of expects me to go out there and try different things and keep iterating and jump in on new stuff. So me, that message will fall on deaf ears for me, because I'm not going to lock myself into just Claude Code. Right now, Claude Code is a big part of what I'm doing, but I'm very conscious about not locking myself in to a platform. But for the average user, for someone who just wants a place to go and do all of their AI-related activities, it's a very good value proposition, or a good message for these companies to say, hey, don't go to Anthropic for coding. Maybe our coding is not 100% as good as maybe we're 95% there, but you also get A, B, C, D, other features, and it's all in one place. Why would you want to spread yourself thin? Just get this one super app, right? And you have access to everything you ever need. And suddenly that value proposition sounds like a good PR move, at least for the company,
Yeah.
whatever the actual intent behind it is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it makes sense. Absolutely. But yeah, anything else you want to touch on before we wrap up?
No, I think we covered a lot of ground. We are coming up on an hour
Yeah,
of chatting. Yeah,
of just winging it.
yeah, that's
Um,
the best.
yeah, it's funny. Just to wrap it back into the beginning, very beginning of the stream, for the first few people that joined and heard us just talking, it's funny that we were talking about like scripts and how a lot of people, especially like real professionals, like media professionals, they have everything nice. You can't even tell they're reading off the script. It's right in front of
Hmm.
them. Like for me, depending on which creator I'm doing a stream with, sometimes I will jot down more notes than others. And I like everything. I like having a mix of everything. With Daniel and I, a lot of the times it's more kind of just back and forth conversation. I might have a few bullet points, but you could tell when I'm looking at it. It's right over there. I'm sometimes looking at the chats, but yeah, completely off topic. But I enjoy these conversations, Daniel. So thanks as
Same here.
always for joining me, man.
I much prefer the whole off the cuff, unscripted chit chat. Maybe because I like rambling, and that's
Yeah.
probably what it comes down to.
Yeah, we were supposed to talk about super apps the whole time, and we talked about how Opus 4.7 is going to be
Yeah,
useful,
then we're
for
just
instance,
like, I think
for
it
like
drives
20
me a few
minutes.
tangents, as long as we reel ourselves back into the central theme at some point. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess we could wrap up. Thank you everybody for being here. Big thanks to Daniel, as always.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Yeah, just before I do, I probably should have done this 5 minutes ago. I'm just going to do this real quick. Thank you, Des. Appreciate it. Um, that's the YouTube channel. We post the streams weekly, as well as clips. So if you joined in late, you can catch the whole video later and increase my watch time, therefore
Mhm.
increasing my YouTube algorithm optimization.
That's where your $1 trillion company is going to come from. YouTube
Robot.
algorithm.
Yeah. Yeah. Subscribe on YouTube. Also subscribe to Daniel Nest here on Substack. And yeah, even though it's a bit of a side project, he has a YouTube channel. Subscribe to Why Try AI on Substack and on YouTube.
Yeah.
And yeah, enjoy the rest of your beautiful Wednesday, wherever you are in the world.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. It's been fun.
Bye.
Thanks, Leo. Talk
Thank you,
later.
Dan.